In the village of Yumen, there was a kind but tired woman named Emma. She lived in a small hut with her son Chimdi, who was her only joy. Emma's husband had died in a terrible storm, leaving her alone to care for their son. Every day, she worked very hard, but no matter how much she did, there was never enough food. Chimdi was growing weaker, and Emma's heart broke every time she saw his hungry, sad eyes. Each morning, before the sun rose, Emma would wake up and begin her daily struggle. She carried heavy firewood on her back, fetched water from the stream, and worked on her small farm, planting and weeding under the hot sun. The soil was dry and cracked, making it difficult to grow enough food. She tried her best, but it was never enough. The village market was no help either. The prices of food were too high. Even a single yam cost more than she could afford. Emma would walk through the market, looking at the baskets of food, but she always left empty-handed. The villagers knew she was struggling, but they, too, had their own families to care for. Chimdi, once a cheerful and playful boy, had changed. He no longer ran around laughing with the other children. His cheeks were no longer round, and his small body was becoming weaker. Instead of playing, he sat quietly, staring at the sky. Emma would sit beside him, stroking his hair gently. "Mama is trying, my son. We will be fine," she whispered. But deep in her heart, she wasn't sure if things would ever get better. She prayed every night, hoping for a miracle, but her struggles never ended. One evening, after a long and difficult day, Emma sat outside her hut. The night was quiet, and the stars shone brightly in the sky. She looked up, her heart heavy with sorrow. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered, "I just need one day to rest. One day without pain, without hunger, without sorrow." She didn't know why she said it out loud, but somehow it felt like the stars were listening. She repeated her wish softly, as if hoping the night itself would grant her peace. Suddenly, the wind stopped blowing. The air, once warm, became cold and still. A shadow appeared at the edge of the forest, near Emma's hut. Her heart pounded as she stood up, her voice shaking. "Who is there?" she called out. The shadow moved closer, growing larger until it stood in front of her. It was a tall figure, cloaked in black. Its voice was as soft as the wind. "You called for me," it said. Emma trembled but did not run. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I am Death," the figure replied. Emma gasped and stepped back, but Death did not move closer. "You wish for rest," it said. "I have come to grant it." Emma's fear turned to confusion. "Rest?" she asked. Death nodded. "You can borrow me for one day. You will sleep in peace, free from pain and sorrow." Emma hesitated. "Just one day?" she asked. "And I will wake up afterwards?" "Yes," Death replied. "But you must understand, death is not a game. If you borrow me too often, I may not give your life back." Emma thought about it. She was exhausted, hungry, and hopeless. Just one day of peace sounded like a gift. She nodded. "I just need one day," she said. Death raised its shadowy hand and touched Emma's forehead. The world around her darkened, and she fell into a deep, silent sleep. That night, after another exhausting day, Emma sat outside her small hut, staring up at the sky. The moon was full and bright, casting a soft glow over the village of Yumen. The air was quiet, and the stars twinkled like tiny lanterns. But Emma's heart was heavy. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "I just need one day to rest. One day without hunger, pain, or sorrow." She had never spoken these words out loud before, but tonight they slipped from her lips like a silent prayer. At first, nothing happened. The night remained still. But then, something changed. The wind, which had been gently rustling the trees, suddenly stopped. The air grew thick and cold. The village, which had been peaceful, now felt strange and unfamiliar. Emma shivered. Then, at the edge of the forest, a shadow appeared. It was tall, dark, and shapeless at first, but as it moved closer, it took the form of a figure cloaked in black. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. She stood up, her legs shaking. "Who is there?" she called, her voice barely above a whisper. The shadow stepped forward. It did not walk like a person. Instead, it seemed to glide over the ground. A chilling voice, soft as a night breeze, spoke. "You called for me." Emma trembled but did not run. Who are you?" she asked. The figure did not move. "I am Death," Emma gasped, taking a step back. But Death did not come any closer. Instead, it spoke again. "You wish for rest, and I have come to grant it." Emma's fear turned into confusion. "Rest," she echoed. Death nodded. "You can borrow me for one day. You will sleep in peace, free from pain, hunger, and sorrow." Emma hesitated. "Just one day?" "Yes." Death's voice was calm. "But understand this, death is not a game. If you borrow me too often, I may not give your life back." Emma thought for a long moment. The idea of true rest was tempting. No hunger, no exhaustion, no suffering, just one day. She took a deep breath and nodded. "I just need one day." Death raised its shadowy hand and gently touched her forehead. Instantly, the world around her faded into darkness. Her body went limp, and she collapsed onto the ground. The next morning, Chimney woke up and found his mother lying still on the floor. "Mama," he called, his small hands shaking her gently. She did not move. Panic filled his heart. "Mama, wake up," he cried. When she still did not respond, fear took over. He ran out of the hut, screaming, "Help! My mama is not waking up." Villagers rushed over. Some gasped. Others whispered prayers. An elder woman touched Emma's face and shook her head sadly. "She has left us." Tears filled Chimney's eyes. He sobbed, clinging to his mother's still body. "No, she can't be gone." The villagers began preparing for her burial, but before they could proceed, the village's native doctor arrived. He was a wise man, known for his deep understanding of things no one else could explain. He knelt beside Emma and placed his hand on her forehead, his eyes closed, as if he was listening to something beyond what the others could hear. After a long silence, he spoke. "Her spirit has not traveled far. Do not bury her yet. We must wait until tomorrow." The villagers were confused but respected his wisdom. They left Emma's body inside her hut and prayed for her soul. That night, as the village slept, Emma's body remained still. But deep inside the darkness where she rested, something stirred. And as the first light of dawn touched the sky, Emma gasped for air. Her heart started beating again. She had returned. Emma gasped as her eyes flew open. Her chest heaved as if she had been drowning and had just surfaced for air. She felt the cold ground beneath her and the rough fabric of the cloth covering her body. Her fingers twitched, and a sharp, unfamiliar sensation rushed through her limbs life. The hut was dimly lit by the soft morning glow creeping in through the small window. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of burning herbs and dried leaves. She turned her head slightly and saw the village's native doctor, Obi, sitting beside her. His old, wise eyes studied her carefully. "You have returned," he said quietly. Emma swallowed. Her throat was dry, her voice barely a whisper. "What happened?" Obi did not answer immediately. He reached for a wooden cup beside him and held it to her lips. "Drink," he instructed. She sipped the warm, bitter liquid soothing her throat. Slowly, the memories of the previous night returned. The full moon, the silent village, the dark figure, death. Emma's hands clenched the thin blanket covering her. I met him," she said, her voice shaking. Obi's eyes darkened. "Who?" Emma hesitated, then whispered, "Death." The room fell silent. The only sound was the distant rustling of palm trees outside. Obi exhaled deeply. "So it is true," he murmured. Emma looked at him, confused. What is true? Obi leaned forward, lowering his voice. Long ago, there was a woman like you. Tired, broken, desperate. She, too, called upon death. She, too, borrowed his rest. But when she did it a second time, he took her forever. Emma's stomach twisted. I only asked for one day, she insisted. Obi nodded, and he gave it to you. But now he knows your name. And once death knows your name, he does not forget. A shiver ran through Emma's spine. She remembered death's final warning. If you borrow me too often, I may not give your life back. She turned to Obi, desperation in her eyes. What do I do? The old man studied her carefully. Do not call him again. No matter how tired you are, no matter how much you suffer. If you call him twice, you may never wake up. Emma nodded slowly, fear settling in her heart. At that moment, the door burst open and Chimdi ran inside. Mama, Emma barely had time to react before her son threw himself into her arms. She hugged him tightly, feeling his little body shake against hers. I thought you were gone, he sobbed. Tears filled Emma's eyes. She held him even closer. I'm here, my son. I'm here. Outside. The village was still murmuring in confusion. Some believed Emma's return was a miracle. Others whispered that she had been touched by something unnatural. But Emma did not care what they thought. She was alive. But in the back of her mind, one thought lingered like a shadow. Death knows my name now. And he would be. The days passed, and Emma tried to push away the memory of her encounter with death. She worked harder than ever, determined to provide for Chimdi. But no matter how much she struggled, the hunger never went away, and the exhaustion never faded. She lasted a few months before she broke again. One night, as the cold wind whistled through the trees, Emma sat outside her hut, staring up at the sky. The stars blinked down at her, distant and silent. Chimdi was asleep inside, curled up on a thin mat, his small body frail from hunger. Tears welled in her eyes. I can't do this anymore, she whispered. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Then, just as before, she spoke the words that had changed her life. Death, I call you again. The air around her grew still. The leaves stopped rustling. Even the insects fell silent. A deep chill spread through her bones. Then, from the darkness of the forest, the shadow appeared. Death stood before her, his cloak billowing in the wind that did not blow. You call me once more, he said, his voice smooth and cold. Emma shivered. Just a few days, she pleaded. Please, I just need to rest. Death tilted his head. You know the risk. Emma nodded. I know, but I have no choice. Death was silent for a moment. Then, slowly, he lifted his hand and placed a cold finger on her forehead. Sleep, and Emma slept. 2 weeks passed. Chimdi waited every day, staring at the door, hoping his mother would return. The villagers, at first, thought she had gone to find food. But as the days dragged on, whispers began to spread. Where is Emma? She has been gone too long. Something is not right. Finally, the villagers gathered a search party. They ventured deep into the forest, calling Emma's name. After hours of searching, they found her. She lay beneath an ancient tree, her body still and cold. Her face was peaceful, as if she were simply asleep. One of the elders knelt beside her and placed a hand on her wrist. There was no pulse. She is gone, he whispered. The villagers carried her body back to the village. When Chimdi saw them return without her, his heart pounded in fear. Mama, he called. Mama, wake up. But Emma did not move. The native doctor, Obi, examined her body. He pressed a hand to her forehead, then closed his eyes. For a long moment he was silent. Then he sighed and shook his head. Her spirit is gone, he said gravely. Death has taken her for good. A heavy silence fell over the village. Some wept. Others stood frozen in shock. Chimdi collapsed to his knees, his small hands clutching his mother's lifeless arm. "It's my fault," he sobbed. "She was tired because of me." Mama Inky, a kind woman from the village, knelt beside him and wrapped her arms around him. "No, my child," she said softly. "Your mother loved you more than anything. She tried to carry the weight of the world alone. But this was not your fault." Chimdi wept in her arms, but deep inside, the guilt never left him. The villagers buried Emma beneath the same tree where she had been found. The entire village gathered, their faces full of sorrow. Obi stood before them, his voice strong but gentle. "Let Emma's story be a lesson to us all. Life is full of struggles, but death is not the answer. When we are alive, there is hope, but in death, there are no second chances." The villagers nodded, their hearts heavy with grief. They realized how much they had taken life for granted. After Emma's burial, they made a promise to take care of each other, to share what they had, and to never let anyone suffer alone again. Chimdi was taken in by Mama Inky, who treated him as her own. She cooked for him, told him stories, and tried to bring back his smile. But no matter how much she loved him, Chimdi never stopped missing his mother. Every week, he visited her grave, placing fresh flowers beneath the tree. "I miss you, Mama," he would whisper. "I will make you proud." Over time, Emma's story became a legend in the village. Parents told it to their children as a warning, to never give up, to always seek help, and to cherish the gift of life. And so, Emma's name lived on, not as a woman who had borrowed death, but as a mother who had loved too much. The villagers never forgot her, and neither did Chimdi.